Alright guys, so in the last video you would have seen that while we were racing the car, the oil pressure just got worse and worse and worse until it was 5 pounds of oil pressure at 7,000 RPM. So we tore the engine all apart. Just about every bearing in the engine was damaged or basically ruined in one way or another. None of the main bearings were spun, they just were really ugly. Some of the rod bearings were spun, so all the rods and pistons and the crankshaft were discarded, and we tore this thing all apart. It's actually already back together, but we discovered the reason why. So there is a pressure relief valve in the Gen 4 oil pans that they added when they added the active fuel management, the displacement on demand. So when they're activating and deactivating the cylinders, there can be pressure spikes when you suddenly take a oil supply need away. So they probably added this oil relief pressure valve so that it would dump that excess pressure and not blow up the oil filter. So we have done tons of welding on this oil pan. There's probably 50 to 100 hours of work in this oil pan. It's been cut apart, welded back together, surfaced. Lots of heat. So what likely happened is this pressure relief valve, in a very basic sense, it is just a little piston and a spring, and basically they size that spring so that at a certain pressure it relieves the pressure. It's a very simple device, but when you subject a spring to heat, it changes properties. And I made a little test rig just to confirm that this is actually the issue. And I basically took where this is located and isolated it and then applied pressure to it, and it didn't take more than a pound of pressure, PSI of pressure, before this thing started leaking. So this is definitely an issue. So what we did is we're using the same block that we were using before, because the cam bearings and all the main bearings were not spun. Cam bearings look great, in fact. Yes, I looked. So it's the same block, different crank, different rods and pistons. So it's all back together, and new head gaskets, brand new oil pump, LS4 lifters. You'll notice, if you look closely, some of you might notice that the harness is different. It's getting a Terminator X Max. So the other issue you probably saw in the last video is the car was shifting rather hard and causing the car to steer. So we're going to use two methods to try and fix that. So one, we already went to spherical non-rubber bushings in the front. We're going to go to a solid bushing in the back. There's actually a fair amount of rubber in the rear mounting point, and that can obviously shift because rubber kind of is supposed to do that. It's supposed to isolate vibrations, and it could also be introducing some suspension movement, possibly some steering of the vehicle. So we're going to go to complete solid bushings on the lower control arm in the front, and we're going to a Terminator X Max, so that means that the Terminator X Max is going to control the transmission. Now some of you may be saying to yourselves, you couldn't get it to work with the stock computer, what makes you think a Terminator X Max is going to work? Well, I had a little oopsie. I was talking with a friend, and I did not wire the input shaft speed sensor to the stock computer, because I thought the input shaft speed should be the same as the engine RPM. So I thought that information was redundant, so I was like, why does the transmission need that? I was tired and hot, and I wasn't thinking, it probably needs that. So that's probably why it wasn't working. So we're going to give it another go. Worst case, we just go back to the manual valve body mod, and we can also have the Terminator X Max. I can set up a custom PWM output that can relieve pressure on the pressure control module. I can basically have it, above a certain RPM, just dump some of the pressure and then shift. So that's what I'm hoping to do there, however I do that. But basically the Terminator X allows for much greater control along with all the boost control. You know, if you guys noticed, the car didn't really lead very hard. You know, it kind of wrinkled the tires and then it lost the wrinkle. You know, it was because it hit the tire initially and then it wasn't making any boost. So, you know, it made like 8 pounds in first gear, at the top of first gear. You know, it had this real gradual ramp to like 8 PSI, and then it fell when you shifted and the RPMs went down. The boost actually fell and then came back up to like 10 in second and then fell again and then went up to like 18 in third. So our wastegate situation, not optimal, not going to work. So we're going to go to 2 wastegates as well. That's another change. Basically, all these changes, or all these things on the car, the reason we did them the way we did initially is we were trying to build this car for the Grassroots Motorsports Challenge, and that allows for only a budget of $2,000, and that means you have to make compromises. So running 1 wastegate, and not being able to put a brand new oil pump in it, not being able to do the boost control, not being able to control the transmission the way you would want, you know, lots of compromises that you have to make. So that brings me to the announcement. This car will not be going to the Grassroots Motorsports Challenge. If you haven't figured that out already, a $1,300 ECU and harness and everything isn't exactly going to meet a $2,000 budget. There's just no room to build the rest of the car, obviously. So it will not be going to the Grassroots Motorsports Challenge. We have another plan to bring another car to that, if it even happens. So we've gotten some criticism from people who, I don't know, they're just naysayers. They seem to hate everything we do. And they say, why don't you just build an engine? You know, you keep doing the stock bottom end stuff, and you keep blowing stuff up. You know, just build an engine. Just build an engine. Well, what went wrong on this car could have happened to a $20,000 engine or a $40,000 engine, let alone a less than $500 engine. So that's why we do what we do. We do such custom one-off stuff. We figure it out on the stock bottom end, and then we might put a rods pistons engine into it. You know, we're not going to just throw the $20,000 engine in and hope everything works. You know, to the people that like to hate out there, it's simple economics. It's just, I can afford to blow up 5 of these before I put the $20,000 engine in. It's just time. You're going to spend it either way. So that's my message to the haters there. But I think I'm going to wrap this video up. We're going to get this thing back together. We're going to get it to the track, and we're going to go break some records. So like and subscribe, and make sure you follow my brother's Fairmont build, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.